My name is Larby. I primarily work in sculpture, but I started my degree off with an interest in painting and digital media. I see my practice as a way of thinking through making, often starting things with an idea of material and focusing on materiality and how to work with a material and exploit its properties, primarily working with non-traditional sculptural materials such as silicons, plaster, resin, expandable foam, sometimes more industrial materials as well. This year, specifically through a lot of reflective thinking and looking back at what I've made, I've begun to realise I'm questioning some traditional kind of sculptural questions about form and how to show dynamic movement in a static material, working with the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional and how they work together, and as well as that, the gap that exists between abstract sculpture and figurative sculpture, as I primarily had an interest in portrait painting in first year, and now it's moving across into a more abstract area. As well as this, part of it is looking at the difference between a natural object and a man-made object, and kind of what I like to experiment with in my practice is how my work exists kind of between the two. I like to give a space in which the material can really show off its properties and how it works, giving it this kind of natural feel to it, but it is still ultimately a man-made object. So this year this has culminated in me filling different fabric forms with plaster and then moulding these shapes during the curing process under their own weight, which has resulted in quite a lot of ambiguous form and shapes. This is something that I was primarily working with to try and demonstrate how you can have this dynamic curing process and this movement of the plaster when it's curing is really liquid, and then as soon as it sets it becomes a solid object. So for me that was really about documenting how a fluid material becomes solid and how I've let the material do that and take its shape by itself, and as well the weight that is present during this process, as a lot of my pieces have come off hooks on walls or balanced on strings, and that is something that I'm aware that has been present in a couple of my works previously. The dynamic is also come across in one of my works, which is made this year, called adipose tissue, which is a chair, a found object that I've then woven loads of my silicon scraps into to make this kind of tapestry that looks like it should again be a solid object, but if you actually were to interact with it, it has its own movement and it's a soft textile even though it has that hard exterior. For me, process is a massive part of materiality, and a lot of the objects that I make are formed through that process, so through the process of plaster drying and setting and curing, or the expandable foam works that I've made are made during their expanding process. However, a lot of these things are quite spontaneous acts, so they will happen in a short duration of time, and time is something that I'm beginning to look at more now, so bringing that element of time back into my work once the object has been made. So at the moment I'm currently in the process of felting my expandable foam shapes, which is a process of putting wool fibres and meshing them together on top of the object to give it a new surface and a new appearance, which takes a long period of time. There's a process of kind of care, and I guess also kind of a process of craft which comes into it a little bit, which you can also see again in my work adipose tissue, because it's made through the process of weaving, and this is something that I'm experimenting with at the moment. I am currently working at home in Northumberland without a studio space, but it does mean that I can work outside a lot more, which is a nice new experience working in my dad's shed. Now that I've got quite a lot of my objects made, is then now taking the time to then felt things and build a structure in which I'm going to display them with, have my own kind of sculpture garden, so to speak. The idea of time is really coming into play now because I have a lot of time to be doing this, and it's a task that's also kind of quite meditative. If I was to sum up my practice in one sentence, I would say that it comes from the seductive nature of materials, and every time I find a new material I try and spend a lot of my time spent getting to know material and experimenting with it and seeing how I can change its properties or exploit the qualities it already has. So my work in one material might differ slightly from my work in another material, but it really just is that desire to find out more.